Good morning. Welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. We are continuing our journey with the disciples, the apostles, as they spread the word of Jesus to all communities today. And so we're going to take a look at chapter 11 this morning. So, if you missed out on chapter 10 yesterday, no worries. We get to catch up on that today because the first, 18 verses of chapter 11 are of Peter reviewing or remembering what had happened to him just previously in Joppa with his dream about the animals on the sheet and Jesus saying, or God telling him that, why would you call anything profane that I have called good? And he is also then recounting his experience with, oh my goodness, my brain just went away from me. Cornelius, with his experience with Cornelius yesterday. And so he's saying this to a group of disciples who are from the Jewish tradition, and they're saying, why did you go to the Gentiles to do all of this? And so he's reviewing what has happened. And what we're told at the end of this is that they too were amazed that Gentiles were being converted. And it's this interesting moment where I think it's just good for us to remember and to share our stories. Sometimes what brings conversion is simply telling a story of conversion. There's nothing more to it than just, wow, getting to see that. And we see that those who are already Jesus followers are having their hearts warmed time and time again by hearing the stories of others being converted. And I think that's also important to remember, but that's what gives us our renewal and our energy to keep going sometimes. When you think about it, church people, we all sit in church on Sunday morning, and we all are under the assumption that we've all been converted, that we're all Jesus followers, but so we don't hear any new stories. And so we need to hear the new stories of the new people who are coming along to the faith. We need to be reminded of our own stories. And so it's important here, it just goes to show, it's important to share your stories. Remember and repeat and repeat and repeat, because it actually does change lives. So then what we find out next is that we have traveled to the church in Antioch. Because evidently a lot of the disciples, after Stephen had been stoned, they kind of dispersed. They didn't know what to do with themselves. And so we find that what the message is traveling now out to the Gentiles, or the Hellenists as they are sometimes called. And it says that the hand of the Lord was with them, and a great number became believers and turned to the Lord. And so I guess sometimes some disciples aren't believable enough or whatever. So what Jerusalem does is they send Barnabas out there to check out what's happening. Is this for real? Is this really happening, I guess? And it says that when he came and saw the grace of God, he rejoiced, and he exhorted them all to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast devotion. For he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. And then it has this little interesting story, because remember, we have now been introduced to this guy named Saul, but he hasn't really come to the forefront quite yet. So we find, though, that Barnabas now, who has welcomed Saul into the Way community, he goes off, finds Saul to bring him back to Antioch so that Saul can witness what is happening among the Gentiles. And so we just have this little moment that, and we hear this word for the first time in Antioch at the end of verse 26. And so it was that for an entire year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And it was in Antioch that the disciples were first called Christians. So we now have, it's no longer the way or followers. They are now kind of this official group called Christians. And it said, and so what happened is the prophets, there were many people who started gathering to see what was happening here. And then we just have this little kind of detail at the end. And it says that Agabus, that's kind of a fun name, Agabus, stood up and he predicted that there was going to be a severe famine in a certain place of the world. And so what happened is now the community is feeling connected to another community. So they gather up money, and we find that they give this money to Barnabas and Saul to take back, so to help out with the conditions that are going to happen. And so we see now this formation of churches connecting to churches that are far away and helping each other in ministry through the gathering of funds that they have, and using missionaries. Barnabas and Saul, they're missionaries now, going about and sharing this good news. And so we're continuing to seeing the many different ways that the Holy Spirit is continuing to work in many people's lives in many different ways. And it's kind of getting exciting, and the momentum is going now. The Spirit is on flame, on fire. And so that's where this chapter ends. And I think what I get most out of it today, as I've kind of already said, is that it's important for us to share our stories of our own conversions, of our own spiritual experiences, our revelations, our heartwarmings, all these moments and times where we truly experience the work of God in our lives. Beyond just the shallow, I see him in the trees, or I see him in the flowers. But really, God brought me out of the darkest place in my life and has given me the joy that now shines through me, where people have a hard time believing I was ever depressed. They just can't imagine it. And it's because of what God has done in my life and helped me to overcome the darkness in my life. And that story needs to be shared so that others can also find hope and joy and peace. And so I invite you to take time to find someone who you can share your story with. How has God changed you? How has the Jesus taught you? How has the Holy Spirit transformed you? And just tell your story today, or maybe the next couple of days, but just tell your story to someone and just watch and see what happens within them by just hearing what you have to say. And so that's my offering for this today's morning devotion with hope, faith, and joy. And I'm Pastor Amanda. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.